Tully, thanks for joining.
Thanks so much for having me, man.
How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm just at home in the studio today, and just returning from a brief walk outside uh, in the neighborhood. I happened upon like some paparazzi when I walked outside my apartment. There's a hotel in the corner where there's like a lot of celebrities that stay over there. So it was like this funny happenstance, right? So like this week on like October 1st, I started doing this thing on TikTok where I'm just like going on TikTok and I'm saying, hey guys, I just want to let you know that I'm going viral on TikTok this month. And like that's the bit basically. I'm just gonna like do it over and over again and see if it hits, see if it clicks or whatever. But I think that like in integrating like funny shit like in New York, such as like running into a celebrity or something like that, will be what maybe allows that thing to like become a viral moment or whatever. So I've been trying to keep my eyes open as I always am. I'm kind of like interested in doing sort of this like paparazzi work or whatever. But it's interesting. You wait. And so, anyways, I go outside. I'm waiting. There was basically a woman standing with an Addison Rae record. So I was like, oh damn, it's about to be Addison Rae coming out the hotel. She's waiting to get the signature on the album or whatever. So I was like, this is worth waiting for. And then it was funny. There was like some women that came out of the hotel that were like from out of town. You could tell they were kind of just like from wherever, Michigan or some shit. And they were like asking everybody like what was going on and kind of like standing in the way of everything. And then like finally after like 20 minutes, like it kind of all happened at once, but it didn't end up being Addison Rae. It was Elizabeth Olsen. And she was like totally shrouded. She like had a scarf over her head. Her boyfriend was like walking around like kind of covered. And so it was just like kind of a funny thing. So I was like, okay, that was kind of like silly or whatever. And then I was like, I need to go just read in the park for a second. And I went over there and they were like filming in the middle of Seward Park, and there was like a whole film crew and like all these like boom mics and people and PAs and all this equipment and stuff. It was like really crazy, really blown out. So it was just kind of like a funny morning of just like stepping into the like production studio that like is downtown New York at times, and I love that.
I'm glad you tell that story because I think of you as a very New York artist.
Yeah, it's something that actually recently somebody I'm trying to think of like who mentioned like the same thing to me the other day, and I was kind of like, oh, that's cool. I mean, it's such a compliment, and like obviously, like I do feel that, and I feel like committed to like my commitment to being in Manhattan, being downtown, and like living here, and like being a part of it all is like a really important part of my practice, and like the just what I'm culling from kind of like what's in my like immediate environment, going out, being around people, and kind of like in the scene and stuff. And I think it's just really like you learn a lot, just like living down here, you see so much, you see culture just kind of like every day walking on the street in all these different dynamic ways, not just like in terms of like the art world or whatever, but it's just like, there's just so much going on in Chinatown every day, it's just really, really diverse. And you have, like I said, there's so many like tourists and things like this too. So it's just like a huge melting pot. And like, I just have always loved that. I've always loved that feeling of like walking out my door in the morning and just being like in the middle of it all and just being like, wow, this is like what New York has always inspired. Like the thing about New York that's always inspired me. Like when I would come here when I was younger or whatever, I would visit and I just was like, oh wow, I would just be so enchanted by the liveliness of it and like the possibility of it all or something. And
That's it.
like,
It's about
yeah,
possibility, right?
yeah. And like then I started to realize like once I started, kind of working in the art world and living downtown, I was like, oh, this is actually like um a really easy way for me to stay connected with like work or whatever when I was doing art handling or building out galleries. And I was really kind of like thirsty for that work for a time, and I would be able to kind of just be like walking around the neighborhood and run into someone, and they'd be like, oh, like I have this project coming up. Like I'm so glad I just ran into you because I like need somebody to come and do this and that or whatever. But it was like for years, it really was like being self-employed as like a contractor or whatever. It was just like it was what made my life function, and I couldn't imagine being in Brooklyn or whatever. Like I really have lived downtown like for almost like 12 years now or something.
There is a difference between artists that live in Brooklyn and Manhattan artists, and you strike me as a very. And I never thought about that until I met you actually, and I started thinking about that. I'm like, I'm like a pretty serious Brooklyn. I mean, I've been in South Brooklyn for the past 15 whatever 12 years in the same spot in Sunset Park, and I guess we really associate our identity, especially as artists, with geography, so where you are is very important. And so it's the people you absorb and everybody you meet sort of contributes to to who you are, especially as an artist, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, like, and especially like in the last couple of years, like I really have taken a specific interest in like investigating and researching like historic places like inside of Manhattan, especially like further, north in Harlem, the Bronx, and Inwood, and like these places. And I think that that has been so exciting to me too. Like I just this last weekend went up to see Eric Mack has that show up at the Arts and Letters
That's the
or whatever that.
Audubon Pavilion.
Yeah, yeah, and like that place is like Versailles. It's so beautiful up there, and like it's a right along the Hudson River, and like it just feels like France up there. And like I just, there's this amazing graveyard that's like up peaked on this hill, and you're like overlooking the Hudson River. I don't know, it's just really amazing, and like you can really, I think, by kind of like establishing yourself in the island of Manhattan or something, like you really just are. Not that you can't go to these places, like you live somewhere else or whatever, but it just to me it feels like, oh, this is like my backyard or something, and I can just like get on one train. I can just get on the six and go straight all the way up or whatever, and then you're right there, and like there's just so much every time. I'm just like, wow, there's
You go
every day
further
that I
up.
can just go on an adventure, yeah, and just like find
Yeah.
these different things, Riverside Park, and like
Oh, the cloisters up there. Yeah.
yeah, and the cloisters, and like it's like the cloisters, I guess, was my introduction to it all, and like that was like so enchanting and so beautiful, and I like I've just had interest in these kind of like gothic sort of architectural and aesthetic sort of design elements in environments, in structure, in art, and in all these things, and like yeah, and then just I didn't really understand like I was like, what is the cloisters, like how did that all come to be, like is it for real, is it old, is it not, is it whatever, and then like those stories then kind of like teach me about like the history of New York, and like who developed the cloisters and bought that land, and he was just like a crazy collector, and he brought all of those stones and shit or whatever and built the thing there in the 1800s. It's not like that old, but it's like it was like a reproduction basically of like what he loved in medieval architecture, and some of these real elements. And obviously his collection was so robust that he housed medieval art that he could bring in there. And then it was even like they went as far as to like buy the land like across the river, so that like when you were at the cloisters, it would always be a beautiful expanse you would look across, and it could never be developed. And like I don't know, just like things of that like scope in terms of like artistic like foresight and like cultural sort of like things that hold so much presence through time and are able to just um you know continue to show people this sort of like magical world or something, even though it's not, it's like fake or something, it's like medieval times basically, like he just built like a fake castle and like whatever, but it's like there's just enough of that. But I don't know. And then it's interesting too, like because New York is like not that old, it's like not that old, so like I really kind of like had to go to Europe to find the stuff that I was like really searching for, and like get back to those like later dates and original Gothic architecture from starting from whatever.
What were you searching for?
I mean, I guess I was really just like I was searching for. the the feeling of like being in those spaces and like um and how to like really create that and translate that feeling like into like installation based work essentially, you know. And I think that like I was also really, you know, interested in just like studying the elemental composition of these old cathedrals and things like that, because I was like painting these kind of like things at the time. And
Where
I
did you
wanted to
go?
like I spent like a month kind of like going up to like Eastern Europe, and I was kind of like in a way like studying like vampiric history as well. Like so I started kind of like I started in Greece just to like have a nice vacation for a couple of days, honestly. I had been working on the Gothic Bridge last summer, and I did the restoration of that in Central Park. And so that was kind of like this really intense you know, just arduous, labor intensive summer. And I just like had planned this trip or whatever. So it was all kind of like tied together, the architecture of that bridge, what we were doing with it, the time, the space, whatever. It was just like cool. It was all clicking. And so I went to Hydra, and then I started like traveling north from there up to, you know, like Romania, Transylvania. I went to Transylvania, I went to like Dragon's Castle, I went to then I went to like Budapest and um, traveled through like the Czech Republic and up to like Poland, basically. And um, you know, it just happened to be like I had never read the Interview with the Vampire. I only like watched the movie like 100 times or whatever, and so I started reading it like as I started this trip, and like basically it was the same route that they take like when they leave like the young vampire that they make or whatever, Claudia, and and uh, the other vampire that was played by Brad Pitt. They like basically like go on this trip to go find the motherland because they like try to like kill the other like evil vampire that made them or whatever. They try to go rekindle their under you know their heritage or some shit like that. So like we got to go into the depths of Europe to like find like other vampires because we don't know what the fuck we're doing basically. And so it's like taking them on this venture, and they literally like place to place. It was like when I was reading it, it was like talking about like the port of Piraeus, like in Greece, and they talked about like being really sick on the boat and not wanting to get off. And when I got to Piraeus, I like was really sick, and I ended up missing the boat to Hydra that night, and I had to stay in Piraeus, like in the port town, and it was just like really dramatic and terrible. And then like you know, and then the next day I got out or whatever, had a beautiful couple of days, and went up to there's like a monastery on the side of Mount Hydros on that island. It's just like so stunning. There's monks up there, and you know, that was kind of just like the start of just being like, oh right, like this is really gonna like just reveal so much to me. And as I just kind of continued the journey, I didn't really have a lot planned. I kind of just figured it out on the way, and I would just come to a town and I'd be like, okay, where's the oldest basilica here? You know, like what's the oldest thing I could see in this place? And like just then started focusing on like relics, and I was starting to be like drawn into these other places. And then by the time I was like up and through Poland, I went to Paris, and then I traveled from Paris to Normandy and you know, northern France at Versailles, and to Brussels and Antwerp and Bruges and all these places. So then it was like it was just like every next thing. It was just like these layers just kept getting like denser and denser and denser, and I kept on just seeing crazier and crazier things. And you know, and then I don't know. I brought it all back, you know, and I've brought it all back into the practice and into the work, and have continued to like develop and study, you know, the things that I saw there that you know I was able to just take these moments and incorporate like certain practices like there and along the way that like for me like really lock in some of these memories. I like do kind of like you know, I practice things with like scent and incenses and perfumes and things like that, and alongside like classical music that is like from the Baroque period to like tie my memory to these places and times, and I can kind of like go back by
That's
using
that's a
these
good
sort of like,
strategy. That's a good strategy
yeah,
because it's hard. It's
yeah.
so that stuff is so dense that it's
It's
difficult to.
ephemeral. You're
Yeah.
just like, oh man. And I was just alone, traveling. And I think that like those experiences alone are just like they do have this sort of like transcendent quality where you're not like you really can just like meditate on, the incredible thing that you're experiencing. You're really not like thinking about anybody else. You're not like I don't know. I think it's easy to be worried in travel if you're just, and I had friends along the way, and that was like what ended up being like amazing is I kind of like had these kind of constellations that I ended up hitting, and artists and all these amazing people along the way, guiding me and just being like open and cool. Every place I went, like people were just being sweet and open and cool, like and I didn't really know. I had never really spent time over there other than like a couple of quick trips, like for work to Italy and to Greece. I'd been a huge before, but so
How did you like Belgium? Did you see a lot of the northern paintings,
I
Van Eyck's and so forth?
yeah, and like it was like I stayed there for like a week and I traveled kind of hard when I was there. So I was like there and then I like ran like back and forth and my friend that I was staying with, like she was kind of like, all right, well, go do what you got to do or whatever. Like she was kind of like had meetings, this and that, which was cool. So I got to meet like a lot of people like kind of like um, in Brussels, like gallerists, this and that. There's openings like that night, that we got in, and so it was like kind of like parties. And I got to go to like the classic bar that like everybody goes to. It's this funny dive. It's called like Jay's or I don't know. It's just like some really random thing, and they brought huge speakers in there and started playing like trap music and shit. I was like, whoa, this is actually like insane and really fun. If people were just getting ripped. And,
There's a good art scene in Brussels, though.
for sure, no, for sure. It was like it was definitely a scene, and everybody's cool. And like when I was there, I ended up at like the opening and just like talking to people about like kind of where I had been up to that point because I had already like hit like a lot of these really intense points of my trip. And it was like basically like Dries Van Noten's son or nephew or some shit that I ended up talking to, and he was like, "Oh, you have to go to Bruges, the
Who is that?
relic." Uh, this guy, he was like a designer and like an architect, and Dries is like it's like a fashion designer.
Hmm. So he was telling
Um,
you to go to Bruges. Did you see?
so he
Did
was like, "You got to go see the blood of Christ." He was like, "Do you know that the relic of the blood of Christ is in
where
Bruges?"
is
And
it
I
in
was like,
Bruges?
"What?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" Because it was like all this vampiric study, and then the relics kind of came halfway through, and it was like, "Oh my God, like this is actually like what I came for. Like this is what it's all. This is like the peak or whatever." And so I was like freaked out, but he was like, "Yeah, so there's a basilica there that's one of the oldest like in that area, like in that region, in that like part of Europe. Basically, it's from like 1050 or like 1100, and so there's two parts. There's the old original. It's like Romanesque style. It's like really brutal and really just like stone slabs, and it's just like a cavern. Like it feels like a prison basically. And that's like the original old part, but then like the other like more like ornate like basilica is a crazy like polychromed wood nave and like all this amazing gold leafing, like all this stuff. But then like you walk up and then through it, and basically since this relic was delivered by the legend of it goes that it was like a knight that had been given this swath of linen that like John the Baptist had swiped Jesus with as he was like on the cross or whatever, and put his blood in the swath and enclosed it and like imparted it to someone who was like righteous in what he had accomplished during some war or something. Like, it was only like 500 years later or something, at the time that he was gifted it or whatever. So it was really kind of like, it was all tied in close enough where they were like, they can almost show the provenance of like where this relic came from in this way. And so basically, since it was like gifted to this basilica in whenever it was formed in 1100 or 1150, the other side or whatever, They have been watching it like ever since. Like there's always someone from their clergy like sitting there like 24/7 all through the year, like since that time. So it's this really intense thing, and you go in, you're not supposed to take pictures of it. Everyone's like sneaking a picture or whatever, but it is wild. It's like encased in a tube. It's like, and then it has like another like glass tube around it, and then it has this gold like ornate things. It's like sitting on like a pillow, and then it's like this. Yeah, it's kind of like scary old like
Amazing.
nun.
I don't know how I missed that. I was just in Bruges this summer.
Yeah, it's
I was
the
there.
cathedral is like kind of tucked in the corner of that kind of center square where there's the
Yeah.
really tall thing with all the flags coming out the side, and like it's literally like you almost like wouldn't see it. It's like black. It's like totally black, and it's like in the corner, and like it is. Yeah, it was definitely a really intense experience. Um while I was there, like I have been smoking like CBD. Like I had like brought a vape or something and some edibles. And so that day I think it was like I had one, I don't know, I've been finding these like funny like edibles and shit. Like they all had CBD shops like in all these little towns or whatever. But so I was like in the town square, like you know how it is there. It's like so crowded, full
It's
of like
insane.
tourists and
It's
like
insane.
and
That
that's why my
place,
friend was like,
yeah.
yeah, she was like, dude, don't go there. Like, you're not gonna enjoy yourself. I was like, you know, I'm good. I need to go
Did
to
you go
this.
to
Like,
St. John's Hospital where they have the Hans Memling Museum?
I like went there like on my way out, and I honestly, at that point in my trip, I like couldn't afford the ticket to get into
Oh
the
no.
museum.
Oh no. Oh, it was so
I
good.
tried
Oh
to, I
no.
tried to sneak
I would
in.
have
I went to the
yeah,
one side, and you could see one painting like from the desk or whatever. It was pretty tragic. Yeah, that was pretty tragic. And I hadn't even really thought about that. Like as I was going there, it wasn't even like on my radar. So in that sense, like the thing that I really had wanted to go and do and see, I got to do, and then I went to some other crazy church that, again, like there was like a Michelangelo or some shit like in the
there's like
back of that
so many.
church.
It's
But that church
insane.
was
Yeah.
also like it was like $40. I was like, dude, I'm not paying $40 anywhere to walk in a church and look at a painting. Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I don't know. I just had to make some certain choices, and I
You can't
wasn't
do it
happy
all.
about it.
Yeah.
But it is interesting because I now am just starting to study the art of medieval anatomy, and I am learning about how the monasteries and the medical centers like were basically the first records of human anatomy and dissection, and there's this intersection of like monks and monasteries, and like I didn't know any of that, right? And so like when I was there and I was like, whoa, the hospital, the St. John's Hospital, I was like, how is this all like so integrated, and like the way that these these really important artworks are like a part of this like hospital and whatever. But now I'm like coming to this information, and that was like the first thing that came to mind. I was like, oh my god, this is like, that is like that's like the deep trenches of like weird Renaissance academia, and
Truly.
like it's just like there's magic that is encapsulated there that like we can't even really access at this point. It's like it's cool to like go and tap in and set stuff in real life, but there is some things I think that just get lost over time. I think there's certain like um, historic practices and things like that. But I don't know. That's really what I've been like on the quest to discover, is how to, utilize materials from the Renaissance and practices from the Renaissance to like produce things that look like these Hans Memlings. And I've gone other places to like study his work and stuff. And like it's simple sometimes when you look at these paintings. Like you can kind of like deconstruct them like in simple ways. And he did a lot of these memento moris like on the verso of the panels oftentimes. And there's such direct, simplistic techniques that are used in the execution of those works. And like it's been really interesting to like really be able to nail some of that stuff and like get the chops to be able to like execute paintings by literally just like unraveling it and like building the surface the same way, and then like just like doing as they did. But it just really is like you have to go there. You have to like even just like seeing the buildings there gives you some deeper understanding of like how things are made and produced and understood. And, yeah, I didn't see, the paintings at the hospital, but I think just like being in that town, seeing what was there, seeing like how that town is constructed and still preserved and perfect, it's like that again is just kind of like talking about like this huger scale of like techne, that is, I don't know, just of great interest to me.
Oh,
So
I think you really also you really understand those paintings a lot better being there in that space.
totally, yeah. I mean, I think because yeah, the architecture is so important in those paintings, and that's like how they're. I just read um, this original Renaissance text from the 1450s called De Leon Alberti, and it really was kind of like this really, really um, systematic approach to talking about. It was kind of like, in a sense, it was like kind of like how like a philosophical text would be written in like really, really plain but really, really definitive language, where the ideas are presented without any embellishment, and like it's just very much about structuring the hierarchical knowledge of how to arrive at a certain place, right? And by using logic and constructive techniques of composition, based on like perspective and light and like just kind of like getting all the things together. And so it's really cool. Like he really just kind of like broke it down. It was like the first time anybody had wrote about the practice of painting. Evidently this was like the first, like they called them letters at the time or whatever. But again, that kind of ties into, I believe, how the monks would like inscribe the paintings that they were making in terms of these like anatomical things, and they would send them to other monasteries, and it was like it's a letter, it's like you're sending it almost like you're publishing it by putting it into somebody else's hands for them to then transcribe and to teach their, you know, their understudies and like whatever. But anyways, it's just it's been a really, I don't know, it's just been like a really exciting um kind of like path to follow, because as soon as you think that you're kind of like, oh, I've like learned, sometimes you feel like you've learned too much about these things. You're like, oh, it's kind of like losing the magic. Like, like how it all, like you kind of decode it, and you like, it's like you strip away all the stuff and like you demystify some of the stuff that to me is like so important about those allegorical works and stuff. And they're just like, there's like the bliss moment where you're just like, oh my God, like an angel painted this or something. Like it's just like feels like it comes from another place or time or dimension or something. And that gem-like quality that kind of just feels like transcendent. And the way that they like just presented light in paintings just felt very real. And I think that there is a capturing of that essence, that is just like really cool. But then at certain times, and I think in any practice or in any study, like I think you reach these certain points of like kind of like fatigue, like of like educational fatigue, where like at the beginning you have like all this like, excitement built up, like you're learning new things, you're like getting better, you're like getting, you're unlocking all these like cool like tricks and secrets and like stuff, and like every time you like unlock something, it's like getting like more and more exciting. But then it's like, yeah, like years go by, you're like, okay, am I still there, am I still present, am I still like pushing myself to like advance what I know, and is it still enchanting in that way that like it's drawing me in over and over and over again? Like, is there enough there, and am I still in the place where it feels like I'm tapping into something spiritual as opposed to something that's just purely academic, or just like reiterating sort of just kind of like skilled representational aesthetics or something. I mean, there's just like there's fine lines, I think, and it's like I want to put a lot of my own personality into these things and a lot of my own like vulnerability and like um, kind of like psychology into the painting that I'm doing. So I think that sometimes it can just be like tricky. You kind of like you have to you have to be sure of the, the decisions that you're making and the path that you're taking, and that those moments that need to occur are just going to like continue on, one after the next. And like I don't know, I just do get to certain points where I'm like, oh, does that isn't hitting for me anymore. And then I will like find some new text. Like I just like went over to the Seward Library, renewed my library card, and like went up to the art section. They have like 20 books, you know, there like wasn't much to pick from. But then I'm like rifling through, and then it was like, I don't know. And then I picked out that tiny book about like, you know, Renaissance techniques of painting. And I was like, oh my God, like of all the books in this place, like this is this tiny little thing, but it was like really so impactful. And it brought me back into like learning these skill sets that like were honestly not something that I have ever taken the time to learn really. I didn't go to school. I don't have like an academic background. So it's like, you know, sometimes I wish that I had done all that stuff, but then I'm like, oh no, I'm actually so glad that I'm learning it now because it makes so much more sense to me. And like it's a tool that I was lacking that then I learned. And then it's like I'm implementing it immediately because I had been wanting to get there and be like, oh, how do I get that to look just like a little bit better, a little bit more realistic? And so now I'm studying more in the way of like realist painting, representation, and light, and still life, and this sort of thing. So kind of again bringing these two worlds I think together of these sort of like divination paintings, these sort of more visionary like psycho spiritual sort of things, and like kind of bringing them into reality and into these real environments. I like recently made like my first kind of like self portrait, and I was sitting here at the table in the portrait, and I painted the painting that's behind me, and I put the painting in the painting that I made, and I like basically like had like a skeletal structure that I had found by way of just like asking to find this thing that I had envisioned, and then it appeared, and weird shit like that has been happening basically like since I was in Europe and finding bones over there and brought them back and all this crazy shit. But like I do keep being like I keep being brought back to yeah, like bones, skeletal remains, like weird shit like that. And sometimes they're like not bones, but they're like I found some spinal column thing, but it was like a medical device. I don't know. So they just kind of like keep presenting themselves in these ways where I can use them and look at them in real life and do still life sketches. And I've been painting by like candlelight and things like that to really just do direct observational sort of interpretations of like how light is hitting things. And that's kind of like where, you know, where this whole, um, you know, practice and kind of like,
So it's mostly painting you're doing now.
yeah. And I guess I'm always thinking about paintings like in terms of like a bigger space and like a bigger idea. Because I think at the end of the day, I really am like focused mostly on like conceptual based work and writing and doing you know critical um, essays and investigations of ideas that I think are just like really important that kind of like maybe are not what I'm delivering or investigating in the paintings. But I think that in this way, like I've just kind of like, yeah, I've definitely like just spent a lot of time in these last 2 years, like focusing on painting because I just think it's like a really important part of the practice. And I think that it sets a benchmark for like where you are as an artist. Like, I don't think you have to just be a painter, but I think that it's important to be knowledgeable about painting and about like what that is because it's its own monster and it's not the same. It's not the same as like I don't know as other art practices, and it has very definitive ways of being understood in the art world and by you know comparison to like all these things, conceptual work, sculpture, you know, installation, immersive based stuff. Like it's hard to compare that to what's going on unless you have some whole like CV and all these credentials and published, you know, like academic text about the work and the research and all this stuff like that makes conceptual work, I think, like more inherently
Credible or
like
something? Or
yeah, or yeah, for like people to know how to like perhaps like you know place those works within institutional settings like for collections and things like that, acquisitions like I don't know. That seems to me like you can't just like come out the gate and be like, yeah, so I have this idea, and
I
then like,
see.
it's like
Yeah.
you have to really got to like prove yourself, and that's why I think that like conceptual artists do like the hardest work or whatever, because nobody cares at the end of the day. Like they just want to like know what's going on with paintings, and they want to know what's going on in the market and collecting work, and like I don't know, like the art world is so much a discussion between artists and like you know, in galleries, and like that's like 1% of the world or something. So it's like you do have to kind of like I don't know. For me, it's like I want to. I just want to broadcast these ideas like further than that. Like I think it's limiting, to only be like caught up in all that shit. I love it too, and I think it's respect to again like just like as in painting, like I think that you have to be really respectful of the like legacy of the art world and like where it all comes from and like how it's all established and how hard people have been working for so long, and it's like super political and like people are risking their lives and their whatever their reputation, like all of these things, like it's not like the fun thing that so many people make it out to be, or like this kind of lavish sort of like elitist sort of like way of just like living in the world or something of like, oh, you have to be.
It sounds like you're concerned about accessibility,
I mean, I think that I'm
which I
always
think you should
interested in
be.
it.
You should be. No, I think,
Yeah. But
yeah,
I think also I'm really interested in exclusivity. And I think that like so much of, I don't know, I think that I have very contradicting sort of like uh interests. Like I really think that over the past 10 years that like access to the art world has been too great, and I think that too many people like are making too much, and there's too many people in the game, and there's too many galleries open, and it's like too much. Like the floodgates went open, and there's like TikTok world, and there's NFTs, and there's all this bullshit. Like I actually like appreciate gatekeeping and exclusivity because I think that it like garners like more respect and attention to like detail. It's like you can't water down some shit that's like it's just like I don't know,
I
but
think you could
it's
have both. I think you can have
yeah, and I
layers.
think I think there's both. I think there's both because I think that there's like things that are too exclusive that become like annoying, and you're like, dude, I should at least have access to that or something, or artists should have access to that or whatever. But I don't know. I like things that like people that not everybody can be a part of. Like I think that there's like some cultish reverence that occurs, and it's kind of like if you don't if you're not really that invested or something, like I don't really want you to be around that stuff because to me it's so important and so sacred and so like I don't know, and so deep and meaningful, and the stakes are so high, and like whatever, and like people just see art as like entertainment or like I don't know, just like something that is just like not how I experience it in my life and like within like the both in the professional and my own like personal life. So I think that there's something about it I want to protect. And I think that like again, like because like even now like how artists like think about their careers and how much artists know about like the back uh office, like ethics of like business about like how to be a good artist and how to promote yourself and how to like talk to I don't know. It's like we all know so much about the whole system now. It's almost like we don't even get to be an artist anymore because like we have to like brand ourselves and like do all this like shit and like I don't know. It's just like it's a weird hyper commodification of like what at one time of course was commodified like marketing of like your work and this and that, but it just like feels different now. It just feels like there's so much like tactical approach to like okay, you got to do this and then do this and then do this and do this and you're going to get what you're going to get or whatever. And I don't know, not that that's like new either, but um I think that it's hard because people don't want to take risks on like what's going on. The emerging kind of like market is like all fucked up now or whatever, or so they say, or whatever the case may be. But I think it's like I think that like it's hard for people to take risks, hard for people to just do like installation based shows when they don't really have like art to sell and keep the gallery open. It's like So in this way, it's like you open up the art world, the art market and galleries to like people that are like doing it to like try to get in the game and make money like as like a new business plan, like as an entrepreneur. And like they don't really know that much about art, but they know that like you can make a lot of money. And they create spaces that like seem like okay, it's like maybe like young and like whatever, but it's not actually like I don't know, it's not really like it's
Do,
not operating within the higher ranks of like I don't know how you establish yourself to like get to a place like that or something. Like I don't want that door to be open like for everyone, you know? And I think that it's like important to like um
do you think maybe artists are like too aware of the workings of the art world now?
I do, yeah. That's definitely like what I'm saying. Is like I think that we get really caught up and we can't like help it. You're like
I know.
online all the time, we're on Instagram, we're
Yeah.
like trying to make our shit look good and pro and like all this stuff. And so then like people go like contrarian against that. And it's all about like these oppositional aesthetics and like edge lord aesthetic. I don't know. It's just like we are so caught up in like being defiantly like one thing or anti a thing that like what we're all doing just is it becomes like this really composed sort of like rehearsed thing. And
Like you're
like I
playing a
think that
role,
like
right?
yeah, and I think that there's like just a really I just think that shit is like complicated for everyone. And I think that like identity is really complicated for people and how they present themselves and how we kind of like live online. And like it's just getting like deeper and darker like every day. And like I'm just so interested in like how we're living our lives like in these duplicitous ways where it's like there's kind of this like no, it's like this the spectacle is like growing and like shrinking. It's like becoming like bigger and crazier, but like everybody kind of like we're saying about the art world, it's kind of like I don't know. I'm always thinking about like I guess we started this conversation talking about like celebrity and like fame and like fame is so accessible now and like it never was like that. And celebrities were like treated like gods and like they were kind of this like unapproachable sort of like idea of a person of like an allegory, you know. And so that's like maybe like an interesting crossover for me to like think or talk or write about. But it's
But you're really absorbing all this stuff being in Manhattan like that. So you're like
yeah,
you're like Lower East
yeah.
Side, is that where you are?
I'm in Chinatown. I'm in like yeah, I'm like okay.
You're absorbing this part of the culture, the intensity. It's I can hear just in the things you're thinking about. It's
And
like
maybe
a
it's just me. Like maybe it isn't even happening like in
no,
real life. But I don't know.
it's
I'm I've been really
you're
into
clearly observing, you're aware, you're absorbing the
true,
energy
but
around you.
a lot of the observation also is just like online because honestly, like a lot of my interest now in this past like 4 months or something, 6 months this year, like I've been really into like the streamer culture and like in particular like Kai Sanat and I like did this
What is
installation
that?
this summer. This guy's like a Twitch streamer and
A
he
what?
a Twitch streamer like a live streamer.
Hmm.
So Twitch is
I'm
like
learning.
Twitch is a platform for like live streaming, and it was kind of like established as like a gaming live feed. So like people that were prolific gamers would like basically stream themselves like this. Like you would have like the game as like a green screen behind you, and you're like sitting there. You got your like headset on, and you're like, hey, chat, like I'm fucking in the lobby right now
So
playing
you're
Call of
playing the
Duty or
game and they
whatever.
can see the game behind
Yeah,
you, or
people
what?
watch it. Yeah, so people are watching you play video games because
Yeah,
you're
I've
like
heard
nice
that.
at
Yeah,
video games. Yeah.
yeah.
So that's like kind of like how Twitch like started, how people got like famous on Twitch and whatever, and that was kind of like the culture. And then, with between like that and like YouTube, like, there was this kind of like influx of people that and TikTok especially too, where like during like COVID or whatever, like people started realizing that you could just like go fuck with people on live and like just get reactions and stuff, and like people would start to tune in because then you like have these clips that you put on TikTok, you put on YouTube, like after going to Walmart and like fucking with people, and they're like, "What the hell, bro?" You like have some clip farmed thing. That's what like they call it, whatever they call it, clip farming, because you're like going to make a situation like so you can film it. You're going to piss somebody off so you can film them being pissed off, basically. And so this became this kind of like thing that people would do. It'd make you viral online. It's kind of like jackass sort of stuff. You're like in public doing crazy shit to get a reaction. So basically there's this guy, Kai, grew up in the Bronx. He's like, you know, in New York, just making YouTube videos, just running around the city, just fucking around, right? And so he just over time has like gained a lot of traction, and he's just kind of like funny. He's got great energy and spirit and shit. And he like, these YouTubers often like kind of make a collective of people that are like their group. And then oftentimes, like once they kind of like get it together or they make some money, they'll get like a house together and they'll start all streaming out of like a house. And it'll be like a hype house or whatever. That's what they call it. Like this crazy sort of like phenomenon of like, okay, let's get creative people in this place and they're making skits and they're making content and like whatever. It's like proliferation of creative material, like because you're all in a house doing it all the time. So, and you're all kind of like feeding off each other's networks. Like if one person is kind of famous and they introduce another person, then that person gets a little famous, they have their own audience, and it kind of like all proliferates in this kind of exponential way. So anyways, this summer I recreated like basically after a time, Kai moves to Atlanta, they buy a house in Atlanta. There's like 4 or 5 of these guys like living in a house. AMP, it's like their brand or whatever. And so Kai's bedroom became like this really iconic thing that you would always see clips of on TikTok or whatever. He's got this like a cheetah print carpet, and he has like arcade games, and like he went to Walmart on one of his streams. Like everything in his room is kind of like shit that he would get doing something crazy, and then it was just kind of like becomes a staple in the room. And then like Nicki Minaj like came on his stream at one point. He started getting more celebrity guests and stuff to come on his stream because he had more kind of motion or whatever. So when she came on, she brought this big pink throne with her so she could sit in her own throne. And like that became like the Nicki Minaj chair. So I got like the chair and I got the arcade games and I did the carpet and I like remade the room
As an
basically in,
installation.
yeah, like in the back of a barber shop in upstate New York, like in Rochester, where I'm from. And I live streamed every day for 30 days. And I would come in and I would like get on stream at the same time every day. And I would have guests and I would like go out in the field and do what they call like IRL streams, where you take like a GoPro, your phone, and you're like out in the world and you're like doing what you're doing. And I was basically like, I was producing artwork. And so I was like doing that stuff live. I was like sandblasting like steel plates and like painting them, like doing these industrial sort of works that I made for a show I did upstate over the summer. And so I like live streamed the process and like just my day-to-day shit. And people would tune in and, I would make all these kind of like posters every day that would kind of like say when I was going live and what I had going on. And I don't know, it's like there's a lot of work that goes into kind of like doing that type of thing. And it really showed me a lot about how much goes into it, how much there is to market, how much content there is to manage. And like I haven't even really scratched the surface because I have hundreds of hours of content now that I still need to go through and edit and get clips and put it all on YouTube and have a place where people can go to the archive of that show and look at whatever they want to look at and just be like, oh, that day you were like silk screening shirts for the place where I was like doing the show. I made like a custom shirt. I designed the shirt live like on my screen. And,
The sounds of the city, right?
sounds of the city, you already
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
But
So you work, so you're doing installation, you're doing video work, you're doing painting and all this stuff. It seems
yeah,
like so would you say like the
cooking.
cooking is that a project or just you just like to
It's
cook?
it's a part of my practice. It's like
Yeah.
yeah, I've been doing like restaurant kind of like these I'll kind of create these
Like
like
food style?
it's more like I did it based on like the first one I did it based on Dorsia, the restaurant American Psycho that nobody gave the reservation at. So I was like I made paintings like based on like some Warhol works from like 1989 when the book was written. I was like this is what the restaurant looked like. I did the show at 56 Henry like in 2022 or something like that. Um, and so I kind of like create these like fictional restaurants, and then I create like the menu. I did like a 6 course meal, and I had like about 15 people. So it's kind of like a curated. Like that is kind of a lot when I really started talking about this idea of exclusivity, which we were kind of touching on like earlier. Like the installation and the dinner was like not open to the public. It was like only if you got the invite, and it was like I don't know, it created problems, it created friction. There was definitely people that were like mad and like being like, what the fuck, or why didn't I get to come? Or, like it created, like I created a monster that like I was just doing as like an idea, but then it actually like came alive. Like it really like did in real life, like what I was kind of talking about in the work. And so that was just like an interesting kind of like um opening and like way to kind of combined like the Kendall Jenner work that I had been making for like several years, like leading up to that with kind of where I was at with like painting at the time. I was making these large scale like silkscreen works on canvas and I don't know. And then the cooking just kind of like tied it all together. And then I continued that practice in the same way that I was studying like all of these like kind of traditional, like mostly like French techniques, honestly. Like I was studying like French symbolist painters and poets and things like that when I was on that side of things. But then the cooking, I started studying like French, like sauce work and things like that from kind of like the same period from like the 1700s to like the 19th century.
It sounds like you basically your whole life is the art is you consider everything you do to be art, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that like yeah, that just happens to be how I live my life, And I think that the interesting thing about like the streaming was that it kind of like showed me that like I could develop a platform whereby I could show that to the world in a way that like it is becomes like a profitable thing for me to just do what I love doing and like what I'm always doing and like be able to like make a living off of it. And I think that like that was a lot of what I was talking about with the installation of the live stream. That show was called Aura Farming, but it was like it was a lot about the essay that I wrote was a lot about like artist autonomy and being able to like kind of like have your own studio basically. Like you don't have to get signed to a label, you don't have to get like have a gallerist like selling the work. Like you create whatever you want to create, and like if you have the platform, like it's as real as you make it, and like
So as a content creator, in a sense, that's interesting. I like that. Like in the same way, like I was
yeah.
really excited
And it's
when
just where that's where it's all headed. I don't know. And like
yeah,
to
yeah.
honestly, it's like maybe like for better or worse or this or that. We're talking about like how many people are involved in the art world and access and who's doing it and a million artists, a million galleries. Like, yeah, like we're kind of like past the threshold of being able to even control any of that or whatever. Like the chips are gonna fall where they fall or something. Like if people are going to make it, it's because they're really invested, they're really like committed to what they're doing, or maybe they have a lot of money coming into it and they have the
Or they
ability
just
to
get
just like,
lucky.
yeah, or they get lucky or they're savvy. Some people are just good, some people are just nice
Or
with it and
or
they just have success,
they could be in the
and
right place at the right time.
yeah, totally, totally.
Because there's so many amazing artists. How do you choose? I just had Julie Curtis on the podcast. I don't know if you know. Do you know Julie?
Yeah, I don't
She,
I don't know her personally, but I know the work.
yeah, she's awesome. I've known her for a long time, and actually, I remember when she was first coming up back in 2016, 17, when Instagram was first, when artists was first using Instagram as a platform. She
Uh-huh.
got sort of noticed. Basically, her whole career started on this like via this like grassroots interest in her work of people just seeing it and being like, oh, where can I find these? And then she would have these
Right,
shows and people would
right,
buy stuff, seeing stuff. We talked about how she just caught this wave at just the right time, and her work happened to also look very good
right,
on a phone or
right,
on social
right,
media or
right,
whatever
right,
it is. I mean,
right.
she's amazing. She's just such a rad painter. She's so
No,
good.
totally,
But
totally.
she
But
she
there's
also happened to have this just be in the right place at the right time.
right. Well, and it's also taking advantage of that and being somebody who has the confidence to just like
Yeah.
go for it like that. And I think that's like, I don't know, something I was talking to someone recently about is like kind of like, and this is like a whole other ass conversation that maybe we don't go all the way down this rabbit hole, but like I think that there's so much involved now with like how people, yeah, just like with Instagram and people thinking too much about it all, and being so nervous and like
Yeah,
trying to
man, it's
like
all curated.
act
It's
some
like
type of way, yeah, or like
yeah,
whatever. Nobody wants to like anything because like nobody wants to even like
yeah.
show other people what they're interested in because they might be able to like be called out for being cringe or like, I don't know. Like I don't really know what it is, but it's really it's just like an interesting place that we've kind of come to, and it's not that like social media is broken. It's not like it's not happening. It's not like people aren't getting tons of attention on social media. It just happens to be like in the art world weirdly. And like, I don't know why that is, but I've noticed like more so than in any other industry, the art world has suffered the most. People that have 50 to 100,000 followers will still get like 300 likes on a post. And it's because Instagram is just trying to push everyone to reels and, this and that. But at the same time, I think that it's like, there's so much too that like comes into like being an artist, being a professional, and like what you look like online. Like if you are, this is just like an example. I was telling someone the other night, but like, if you're selling drawings on your Instagram story, like that might not be the best look for like how we've come to know like being a professional artist. Like you should have somebody handling those drawings. They should be going through a gallery. They should be framed, mounted. They should be photographed properly. Like I don't know. And these are things that like also I've come to learn over time and working with a lot of different galleries and like having really high standards for like what I want to see in how I present things to the world. Like I'm just really particular about that. But at the same time, there's like, yeah, you kind of disadvantage yourself because like as an artist that wants to just only be making art and getting, work only related to that, like I should be trying that avenue basically and being like, wow, I should be like selling things however I can or making fucking merch or making t-shirts or making whatever. But like you get worried because you're like, dude, you're gonna look corny, you're gonna look cringe. Even the live streaming shit, like I honestly went a bit out on a limb because I knew that people were gonna be fucking
But I
annoyed
like that
that I
idea
was a
though. There's
streamer all of a
something
sudden and
I
like
like
it's
that.
annoying.
But everything
But
there's always going to be somebody who
of
there's
course,
always
of
going to be
course. But
somebody.
then, yeah, people loved it too. And every time now I go out, people are like, "Yo, so like, what's up with the streaming? Like, where are you? Were you still streaming? You still live? Like, what do you got going? It's like so funny how like people really, like I just did it once, and all of a sudden I was a streamer, And I think that I recently
Yeah.
like said that to someone, but it was just like this funny thing that I really just didn't anticipate, like even in terms of like the endurance performative aspect of like doing that every single day. Like I just set it to set myself up to just be like, I don't know, I've been interested in kind of practicing things like that where like I throw myself into a situation and figure it out. And like instead of letting like anxiety get the best of me or wondering if I'm doing it right or whatever, or if I'm gonna actually commit to it, like I just do it and then I just say, okay, like you said it online, so you better fucking like I don't even care about anybody's perception of it, but I care to commit to my own like promise that I made
Yeah.
to the
That's
internet or
yeah.
something, you know what I mean? So it's been funny like that. And that's like with the TikTok thing, I think I'm trying to like really just like manifest the thing of like, I'm going viral on TikTok this month. And like, I'm gonna do it because I'm just like, I just believe it. And I just am gonna keep trying to do it. And I'm gonna keep thinking about it. And
But I
like,
think it's interesting that just in terms of the model, like I think what I'm sort of like if I'm trying to take a step back in terms of just
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
what you're doing in the same way that I thought there was a lot of promise in NFTs. I mean, I know there was a lot of shenanigans going
Sure,
on there
sure.
and a lot of silliness and there's a lot of people it's easy to look back and be like, "Oh, what was a silly fad."
Yeah,
But the idea
fundamentally,
but the idea of it,
yeah,
it's like that an artist could create content that people were interested in. They could generate income and every time it's sold, they get
right,
they
royalties and
royalties and things
rental
and the
income. Yeah,
system was built in on the
totally,
blockchain, which I think
totally.
there was a lot
No,
of
it made a lot of
promise.
sense.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it made a lot of sense, and there was a lot of good things about it. And I think it just in the same way that's like you're
got in the hands of the
looking
wrong
for,
people.
yeah, unfortunately, as things
That's
do.
the thing, though, and then you're like,
Yeah,
oh, that's about where that kind of
yeah,
gatekeeping, like exclusivity, comes in,
yes,
where it's like
yes.
all of a sudden the people that were handling that stuff were mismanaging it, and they weren't giving it the reverence that it needed to become something substantial and something that could like perform through time, not as like this gimmicky like bullshit thing. So
But
that's like
maybe
where
it's like a
yeah, it's like
finding a new system, a new model, or a new approach. And I
yeah.
think
Well, I mean,
what I hear
they're
you
gonna
saying,
tell us whoever's next up. They're just gonna let us know what that fucking model is like. Unfortunately, we don't really have much of a choice about like
but we're
how
shaping it. We can
Gen
help. We can
Z and
shape.
Gen Alpha are gonna like talk and think and produce art is gonna be way different. Like all this shit is like kind of cooked. Like I know that there's still like gonna be auctions and this and that and like all that stuff is still gonna like hold its weight for like a while, but like I don't know, do they just seem to have a really, really different way of thinking about objectness, about appropriation, about imagery, about materiality.
You hear about people in the next like what are the next generations? Gen Z,
Gen Z, Gen Alpha.
yeah. It seems like that there's kind of a almost a rejection of the way we use social media and the way we use screens in a
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. I think there'll be like a split or something. I think there'll be like
Yeah,
radicals that are like
yeah,
fuck the internet and like fuck phones and like all this
yeah,
shit. They're just gonna be like, nah, I'm not into that stuff. They're
yeah.
gonna
Some people
like
want real art.
try to bring it back or something. But
Yeah,
uh yeah, I don't know. I mean all that there's a lot to speculate about,
yeah.
I guess,
Who knows? Who knows? It's
in
very
that
interesting.
arena. But but it is interesting. I mean, I have nephews that are like teenagers now, 16 or whatever, 14, 16, and like you know
Brendan's kids, they're
yeah,
that old
and
now?
like yeah,
Wow,
it's crazy, and
wow.
like
Yeah,
they're so creative, and they're thinking about the world, and they've seen it all, they've really like been around, art
yeah.
since they were infants, so like they've seen
Did
so
you guys
much,
come?
and
Did you
it's
guys
like
come from an art family?
I mean, we're all interested in art, but like no, like we're just, my dad's an industrial contractor, and like it's just been doing that in upstate New York for like 40 years. It's just blue collar, just hard work.
From
But
Rochester.
brought us, yeah, from
Yeah,
Rochester. But
yeah.
all that stuff is like, it also is like all that stuff is stuff that I spent time doing with him, and over the years, it's like yeah, there's a lot of industrial stuff, but it also is restorative work. So it's like it definitely gave me my first sort of understanding of restorative work, historic conservation, and like gave me an appreciation. I think like a lot of this architectural sort of like interest stems from those
Yeah.
early projects. We would demo these incredibly beautiful buildings in Rochester from the turn of the century or late 1800s, and they had all the incredible original like kind of like factory mechanical components that were being run by the falls there. There's a high and low falls in Rochester, and basically like during the time when there was a boom and the flower industry and these things, like these factories would use hydroelectric power directly. Like they would have a leather belt that would run out of the building. It was like 12 inches wide, and it would run to a fucking uh uh like a fucking water,
Like a dam, like
yeah, like a thing that would spin,
well or
like
something. Yeah.
whatever the fuck you call it. And it would literally like, it would like drive the building, it was like a big motor. It was like the building was a big engine block, and the fucking belt was the falls. Like, I don't know. It's really incredible, like how they were like building infrastructure of that city. But anyways, we got to see a lot of these crazy buildings and how they're made and the old timbers and the old kind of architectural details, and spent time figuring out how to get them to look right, and not just go in there and just like beat it up and like do what a lot of people do, which is just like get it done fast and fast and dirty or whatever. Like there's a lot of finesse.
Did you go to undergrad?
No, no. Like I just went to high school, and then I went to Purchase College for 1 semester, and then I dropped out.
I feel like it's kind of refreshing though. I mean, I think you probably dodged quite a few bullets. I mean, it's a two it's there's always good and bad things, but it seems
Yeah,
like you were able to
double-edged sword.
yeah.
I,
Yeah,
I've
of
lived a lot
course.
of different lives. I mean, I think that if I would have like stayed at least like through the 4 years, maybe like at Purchase, like I probably would have come directly to New York after that, because I would have figured out like maybe like how to just graduate and immediately like get a job in a gallery or whatever. Like because I would have just had more experience and understanding of that, and I was doing really great work. Like in the small amount of time that I was there at Purchase, I was like writing like crazy. I was like studying philosophy, art writing, like art critical, curatorial writing, and like and these and poetry, and like I was excelling in all these fields and shit, and it was all good, and so it was just like I don't know, it just like wasn't right for me, but um then I ended up going back to Rochester, and I lived in Rochester for like a number of years, and I would try to come back to New York and try to figure it out, try to make it happen, and like I just didn't really get it. Like I didn't really know how to, just get into the I didn't know how to get into it. I didn't know that like an art handler was a job. Like, I was so young and naive that I just like had no clue that you could just go in there and just like, oh yeah, do you know like paint your fucking walls or like patch a hole? Like, I don't know. So, yeah, all these, and so then I spent 4 years like working for my dad doing this industrial work. I was doing heavy like rigging and like all this crazy industrial stuff and lead abatement and containment and like painting on industrial scales and doing project management is what I really ended up getting into. So I was kind of like running crews, and I was then a foreman, and doing like safety protocol and like dealing with all of these
So when did you
really
finally move to New York?
2013 for real, but I had lived here like a couple of times prior to that. Like I had lived for a minute like in Crown Heights. I lived for a minute like in Sunset Park, and this was like 20 I don't know, like 2007, and then like once in like 2009, and then finally in 2012 like stuck,
And now you're
so
here. And
yeah.
the rest is history.
The rest is history. Yeah,
Well,
downtown and downtown ever since. And
that
that was what it really. That's what changed it all for me. Is
yeah.
when I figured out, okay, live downtown, figure out how you can just afford an apartment downtown, and then it'll all come together. And that's really what happened.
Mm,
So, you
indeed.
know,
Well, here you
ever
are.
since.
I think that's a good place to wrap it up, full circle. So is there
Yeah,
anything
man.
else you want to add before we go?
Last week of the show over at Alex Burns, want to let people know to go over there. I think Tuesday is the last day. So Coolness Space 354 Broadway. I got a new work in there, and new work to come. Stay tuned. I'm going viral on TikTok this month. So
All right. Well, it was great to chat.
yeah, man. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for coming on.
All right, man. Talk soon.
Take care.